Aloha golfers! Welcome to Golf in the Cosmos, episode number 41. I'm Kevin Rabowski, and here we talk all things Mac O'Grady and MORAD. Well, I gave everybody a little preview on both Instagram and on YouTube about this 4-part series that I'm introducing today. Today will be part 1. I'm very excited to show the world the technique of Mac O'Grady in 1987. This is home video footage by Mr. Ken Latham, and so we have to thank him. He took these videos at LaCosta Country Club in the practice rounds, 1987 Tournament of Champions PGA Tour, which Mac happened to win. So this is against the best players of the PGA Tour, the previous winners of 1986. And here we see Mac really at the pinnacle of his playing ability, teaching ability, very classic MORAD, early MORAD model. And so yeah, we have this rare privilege. We have to thank Mr. Michael Long for donating this video to myself so I could share it with the MORAD community, and again Mr. Ken Latham for videoing it in 1987. So what you'll see here is Mac in the first part on the driving range. Mac is practicing as well as giving some instruction to Dan Forsman, who's in the MORAD program at this time. I'm going to edit out some of the parts that show other players. There's not much, but basically just to make it more continuous and to see as much of Mac as possible. And again, this is very homemade footage, so you're not going to get great audio. The camera is a little moving around a bit. It's not very stable in some parts, but the footage is really, really amazing. And we're so lucky to have this and to be able to visualize the golf swing in pretty much its perfection. Now, I say that because having a little bit of expertise in anatomy through especially the yoga practice, so the yoga practitioners as well as practitioners in other fields that deal with very functional anatomy. This would include gymnastics, dance, and acrobatics. So these areas of skill have practitioners that know tremendous amount of information about functional anatomy. There's a lot of golf instructors that say a lot of the fancy words, anatomical expressions, terminology, jargon, but to really know it intimately, I think you have to perform it, and then you can coach it. So just memorizing a lot of fancy terms, it really doesn't mean that you're a great teacher trying to make yourself sound smart. So basically, we want to keep things simple for our students, and this is what made this method so amazing. Was it really is a simple method based on just very, I would say, the common denominators are not complicated, right? So I mentioned this a little bit on the Instagram post. We rotate around a fixed center. We start with low hands. We have our upper arms attached to the body. We hinge the wrist, rehinge the wrist, snap the left knee to clear the hips, and that's the basics. Now, of course, there's many other little nuances to it, but in terms of just generally teaching a model, that's very basic, very simple, very, very doable for all ages and all flexibility levels. Of course, we, as a coach, we tailor the instruction to the individual, but it's good to have a certain methodology or at least a general model by which to teach from. So you're not just, winging it with every student. And this is what made the MORAD system very organized and very structured, and really Mac was ahead of his time, I believe, in doing this. Creating a model, creating checklist. Perhaps he went a little bit too far with some of the technical aspects of it, but I don't think so much so in this 86, 87 version. So what we're going to see here is, again, just to go back and reiterate, Mac has very low hands. This helps him hinge the wrist earlier and set the club, and you'll notice, especially with the shorter clubs, how vertically he sets the club. So he's not trying to get the club to trace the plane line. He's trying to get his wrist to hinge more to its maximum range of motion. And why? Because this is how you get speed. So I think one of the most amazing aspects of Mac's swing is how fluid, how effortless, how easy it looks, and Mac is hitting the ball very, very long. So 1986, 1987, he's amongst top 5 on the PGA Tour in driving distance. But he's swinging very easily, right? So this, to me, is the pinnacle of skill. Can you swing effortlessly and get power? Of course, you watch World Long Drive Champions on Instagram or social media, and you'll see maximum range of motion, a loss usually of some balance, and definitely looks like they're flailing away at it. And certainly with great timing and practice, you can get away with that in terms of showcasing long drives. But to post a score in all kinds of conditions on all kinds of golf courses, gosh, the swing needs to be more governed, right? And it can't just go anywhere it wants. So this is where Mac is basically structuring the swing, using these basically governors to have a very repeating swing. And I think when we look at this swing, it's very important that you need to know the anatomy. You have to know alignment, geometry. You have to be able to see the clean lines in the swing. So what's interesting to me is I've shown these kinds of videos to other pros, both teaching pros and PGA Tour pros, and they'll watch Mac O'Grady in 1986, 1987, and their comment to me is, well, so what? That's no big deal. That just looks, address posture looks a little odd. Swing doesn't look, anything special to me. So in the back of my mind now, oftentimes I will not be, so negative, because I know everybody's on their own journey, and I was once, sort of young and also, new to this game in terms of the knowledge and also the expertise. So this takes probably a good 30 years of teaching before you can really start seeing the beauty and the symmetry and the skillfulness in a golf swing. And to be able to coach it is even another expertise. But it would be no different than listening to 2 concert pianists, and they're playing Chopin, and one is a world champion pianist, concerto, and then another is just a very good pianist. Can you hear the difference in the playing, right? Can you watch ballet and see the difference between the expert masters and maybe just very good ballet practitioners, right? So when you're more of a novice, more new, you might not be able to tell. You might not be able to see or hear these things at first, because it takes a lot of skill and a lot of expertise to know the difference between a true master and someone that's just very good. Some people will listen to Miles Davis or John Coltrane, and it brings them to tears. Others listen to that and say, what is this? This is just nonsense music. So again, it's a trained ear and a trained eye that can tell the difference in skill. And if you have a trained eye, then you can see the skill in this golf swing. And if you don't, well, I'm sorry, you have your right to your opinion, but there's a long journey ahead. So everything that Mac does in this golf swing is done with a purpose. It's not done willy-nilly. It's not done by accident. It's not done because he's gifted or talented. It's done by design. And of course, Mac has designed the whole thing via a checklist, and he just blends it so effortlessly and seamlessly, and that's what you're going to see. So I hope you enjoy this first part. Again, just to reiterate, you're going to see the low hands at address, You're going to see the early set and the more vertical wrist hinge. Driver gets more flat, a little bit cupping at the top. That gets the club to parallel. Also, Mac is very much down the line at the top. He's not laid off. Now, what happens is some people might ask, when you get the shaft a little bit more vertical at P3, which you'll see Mac, now he's not completely vertical. He's just somewhere in between the ball and his right foot. But what happens from P3 to P4, he does not move his right elbow. So the shaft just folds perfectly down the line. If you go to P3 vertically, right, or more vertically, and you keep the right elbow moving from P3 to P4, you're going to cross the line. So that's really a big problem, and probably one of the things that influenced Mac later was seeing the golfers cross the line at the top with a little vertical P3. But if you stop the right elbow, the shaft will fall in line. That's the beauty of it. And you really see the continuing of that falling from P4 to P5. So Mac is very naturally flattening the shaft. All controlled by what the right elbow is doing. Keep staying in the down and in position, right? And he does that masterfully from P3 to P4 to P5. And you look at Mac's P6, I mean, it is absolutely perfect. Arms are out in front of his body. Club head is out and right on the target line. Club face is square. I mean, it's just hard. How can you make a mistake from there, right? And that's what Mac would say, right? If you're gonna go down this MORAD journey, the idea was to make the swing as foolproof as possible. So there's no reason for you to hit a bad shot because everything is in alignment, everything is working in concert. And of course, I mean, to be perfect is, maybe unrealistic for the human body, but the closer you are to perfection, you have what I would just call simply a low maintenance swing, right? A repeatable swing. Building a repeatable swing that's easy on the brain to repeat because there's symmetry and ease of motion and efficient movement. So these things are, imperative to have a repeating swing. The other thing that we're going to see is through impact how clean Mac is with his rotation, right? His left knee is straightening, which clears the hips. He's not trying to throw his hips, and he's staying in his tilts, right? So the follow through, he's coming out of his waist bend. I'll do a little side angle, and then he's replacing it with a side bend. So Mac is trying to stay tilted to the right. He's not, in the shorter clubs, he's not really whipping the hip and the knee all the way over to close the gap between the knees. Now you'll see that more with the driver because there's more speed, more rotational force at play. So the driver is going to come right around like this. But with the shorter clubs, even maybe the middle irons, there's a gap between the knees, right? So the hips are a little bit more passive in the shorter irons and then more aggressive in the longer clubs. So I think this also is something that's hard to really list in a series of characteristics and trying to do a model swing because the swing characteristics are changing a little bit as the club gets longer and there's more rotational force at play. And I think this is maybe the impetus of why Mac was never really satisfied with his findings. I think as the technology and the cameras got better, I think Mac started to see that he didn't do everything he professed that he was doing. Of course, we all feel like we're doing certain things in the swing. The difference between feel and real, right? So as the camera technology got better, Mac could see that he was really doing some things that he wasn't feeling and wasn't teaching, and so made adjustments. But, I think, first of all, I don't think he had flaws in this swing. I think there's certain allowances you make when the rotational forces get stronger. For example, when you have low hands, it's very difficult to make a full rotation, especially with a longer club. without raising up a little bit, without coming out of the waistband, right? And so I think when Max started to see that with the longer clubs, he started to change the technique. So the shoulder plane got steeper. And then all of a sudden the swing isn't so much governed on rotation, right? And so these are how people will ask, why would Mac ever want to change this swing? And these are some of the reasons why. He wasn't really satisfied. He saw some things that he wasn't happy with, especially as the technology got better, and especially as you see with the longer clubs. Maybe he wasn't doing it like driver, he maybe wasn't doing everything he thought. Foveal field, right? So Max turning his head maybe a little bit more, and his hands maybe weren't quite as low as he thought at impact. Maybe going more CF to the right with the driver, so not as much CP, more CP to the left with the shorter irons. So these things, creates, this tinkering that happens. The brain wants to go in different directions. And I think this is what happened a little bit with Mac as the decades went on. But that being said, enjoy this first part. Mac on the range, looking great. There's a lot to take from it. I would watch it several times and watch the master at work. Aloha.